Well, now let's catch up with someone else from our past. Stone Phillips updates a story we aired in 1986. My Son is Innocent.
Sometimes I think of who are these people to tell me that I did this and keep me in here. You know, it's like a bad dream. You know, and I'm just wondering when it's going to end.
Bobby McLaughlin, age 20, in jail for a murder he swore he did not commit. Did police have the wrong man? Dick Schaff reported the story that began with a shooting in Brooklyn, New York in 1979. 15 people witnessed the murder, and one, only one, identified Bobby McLaughlin as one of the attackers.
After the lineup, I was, sarcastically, I said, how'd I do? Can I go? And he said, no, you can't go. You're under arrest for murder.
At the trial, there were alibi witnesses, and not a shred of physical evidence placing McLaughlin at the scene of the crime. But the jury believed the prosecution's eyewitness. McLaughlin's foster mother was in the courtroom for the verdict.
It was as if it was a jackhammer. Guilty, 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 guilty.
Mary and her husband, Harold Honey, had raised Bobby McLaughlin from the age of 3. As Bobby began a jail sentence of 15 years to life, they began the struggle to prove his innocence.
I spent night after night after night, weekends, papers all over the table, testimony, reviewing police reports, talking to people within the police department who made statements like, this is a bummer, this is a bum ID, you really should not let this go on, you've got to keep fighting.
Honey wrote more than 70 letters to public officials and members of the press asking that the case be reopened. 2 of those letters reached people willing to help.
I have some concern as to whether or not there was a miscarriage of justice in this case. And it may well be that the wrong man is in jail.
Never before this case, in the hundreds and hundreds of prisoners' records that I have looked at, have I ever come to believe personally in a prisoner's innocence.
Finally, in 1985, the Brooklyn District Attorney reopened the case.
Only eyewitness. Subsequently has altered his stories on several occasions. We think Bobby McLaughlin should be set free. I've asked the governor to do that.
Holtzman asked New York Governor Mario Cuomo to commute McLaughlin's sentence, an act that would have freed him, but would not have stricken the murder conviction from his record.
If the governor were to commute his sentence tomorrow and release him the next day, would you still go into court?
Absolutely. I'm going to clear my son's name. He was not guilty.
But the DA refused to take any step to set aside the conviction. Bobby McLaughlin began his 7th year behind bars.
It's next week, next week, next week, next week. Something's going to happen next week. And that's the 2 most hated words in my vocabulary now, next week, because it just keeps going on and on and on.
That was 2020, May 22nd, 1986. 6 weeks later, just in time for the July 4th celebration, Bobby McLaughlin was set free, the murder rap wiped from his record. The DA finally conceding that the case against McLaughlin had completely fallen apart.
I really owe it all to my father. He's been a lot of help. I don't know what to say. I'm just happy.
I got my boy back. I got my family back.
I feel 2020 had a lot to do with it. When people understood my story, then they realized if you just tell somebody, yeah, I'm innocent, yes, I'm innocent, everybody's innocent in jail. Everybody says, yes, I'm innocent.
Today, Bobby McLaughlin counsels high school students in Brooklyn, helping them find summer and part-time work.
You want this job in the video store, right?
I'll get on here.
Okay.
Bobby thinks he's just right for the job.
I wanted to help teenagers so they don't go on the wrong track. You know, a lot of them could end up in jail, and I know what it's like. So if I could put my little 2 cents in and help them, I'll do that.
7 years wasted, but what a happy ending. Well, in a little while, Bob Brown with a gem on the arts and entertainment, and Tom Jarrell with some of the most powerful pictures and storytelling we've produced. Highlights from our Moment of Crisis reports. First, though, a smile. How a comic we profiled 7 years ago tried to impress Sylvia Chase.
I'll tell you, Sylvia, I know a lot of big people in show business out there, a lot of big people. Steve Martin, Steve Martin's a good friend of mine, good friend of mine. You kidding?
Who is that?
Steve, Rodney Dangerfield.
Go away.
He's kidding around. He's a comedian. He's crazy. You don't know what he's doing. Steve, Rodney Dangerfield.
I'm busy. Go away.
This is ridiculous. Steve, I got 2020 here. The cameras, it's television.
Television? Hi, come on in. Nice to see you. Come on in. Come on. Seriously, come right in. How are you? You know, when I first started working in the business.
Hey, do me a favor. Will you can cut this part out? Well, that's the story of my life. No respect.
Even when a TV camera captures a breaking story, the human drama can be hard to convey. And that's why we developed our Moment of Crisis series, to show not only what happened, but how people at the scene felt and thought, acted and reacted. It's a concept we're especially proud of, and Tom Jarrell has handled almost all of those reports. Tom?
Hugh, I'm sure everyone will appreciate that when we see footage of an especially dramatic news event, there are people involved, characters in a sense, whom fate has cast into different roles. In preparing a Moment of Crisis report, we examine all the available film and videotape. We then identify key people in those scenes, and we go in and get their first-hand accounts. The technique often results in very dramatic television. Here's a sampling.
I knew in a way this time that I'm going to die any minute.
And all of a sudden, the building started falling apart. I remember falling through the air and feeling the different decks or floors collapse underneath me.
I thought it was a dream. I didn't think something that bad could happen to me.
All these people have one thing in common. Their lives have been marked forever by a moment of crisis. Events that grip whole communities, the nation, sometimes the world. 2020 found a unique way to examine these events by incorporating emotional eyewitness accounts of bystanders, participants, and heroes they created. We brought new perspective and understanding. Tonight we relive the experiences of those touched by a moment of crisis. New Orleans, 1972. A fire erupts at the Roth Center, a modern high-rise built without a sprinkler system. The flames and intense smoke trap 5 women in a 15th-floor beauty parlor and force 8 men onto the roof.
We knew we only had just a very few minutes before this whole thing collapsed in flames. We had resigned ourselves to the fact that, yes, we were going to die. But we were not going to burn. We had made up our minds we were going to jump and get it over with in a hurry.
I started to ease myself towards the building, always looking to my left.
Alerted by the smoke, commercial helicopter pilot John Lockwood spots the 8 desperate men and decides to attempt a rescue.
Oh, mercy. I'll tell you, that helicopter coming in there was probably the most beautiful sight I ever saw in my life.
What John Lockwood never did see were the women in the window below, frantically trying to get his attention. The firemen tried everything, including 13 shots with a rope gun, but it was too late for help from below.
About this time, the woman that was in the hanging from the window, she fell. And I knew then that, that it was over with, The rest of them would follow, which it did. It started like a chain reaction.
The 30-year-old owner of the beauty parlor was the second to jump to the rooftop 8 floors below. Still desperately clutching to the windowsill were a 56-year-old legal secretary, a 31-year-old housewife, 7 months pregnant, and Nat Smith, still holding onto her coat. The time had run out.
When I looked out of the window, I saw Jesus, and he had his arms open, and he said, "Come." When he said, "Come," I went.
One by one, they fell. It just was like it wasn't happening. But it was.
I broke both my legs badly. My pelvis was broken in 3 spots. My back was broken. Ribs, collarbone, teeth.
Nat was to spend 6 weeks in a coma. The other 4 women lay dead on the gravel roof, 8 floors beneath the window from which they had jumped.
I cried. I really did. I'm not the only one.
Saigon, 1975. North Vietnamese troops attacked the heart of the city, forcing the evacuation of thousands of Americans and South Vietnamese. By late afternoon, helicopters carrying an additional security force arrived at the embassy. Marines ran through the compound and positioned themselves along the embassy walls.
The U.S. Marines in combat gear all along the wall and fences, using tear gas and using the butts of their rifles to push and shove and kick and stop the Vietnamese back over the fence, back out into the streets again.
Hour after hour, helicopters continued picking up loads of evacuees. And as night fell, the choppers kept coming.
The president said, "You tell Ambassador Martin to get on that next chopper out of there," and that's it.
As the last chopper flew off, 420 fully processed, high-risk Vietnamese were left stranded in the compound. Nearly 7,000 Americans and loyal Vietnamese were evacuated that last day. The war was finally over. Cairo, 1981. The assassination of Egypt's President Anwar Sadat on the reviewing stand at the annual military parade. Around 1 p.m., jets streaked overhead, their roar and colorful exhaust grabbing the attention of those in the stands. That was the moment the assassins chose to strike. ABC cameraman Fabrice Moussas was positioned about here in the press section, taping the parade.
As the gunmen were starting to come off the truck and throwing grenades, we're all landing short of the reviewing stand. I took the camera off the tripod, and Allie and I ran towards the reviewing stand. And we're sort of running parallel at the same time, about the same speed as the gunmen. One of the gunmen at this point turned around 180 degrees and pointed his gun at us. And I really thought he was going to shoot us. I put the camera in front of my face because I really thought he was going to come around and shoot us. And I thought this camera was thick enough it could ricochet a few of the bullets. And it's only 6 seconds, but I think it goes on forever.
The entire attack lasted 45 seconds. When it was over, the president of Egypt was dead. Dead, too, were 6 others. 43 others were wounded. Cape Canaveral, 1986. The launch of the Space Shuttle Challenger. Its crew for the first time includes an ordinary citizen, school teacher Krista McCullough.
And I just everybody tuned in on day 4 now to watch the teacher teaching in space. I'd like to...
Her students eagerly watched that day, as did the nation. 1, and liftoff. Split second ignition, smoke emerges near the joint between the rear segments of the right booster. The joint has failed, and gases are burning through. But the smoke is not seen by the controllers, and the Challenger continues its ascent.
During the first phases of flight, there's not much you can do. So you tend to scan the systems, and we did that, and everything was looking just as it should.
Challenger, go at throttle up. Challenger, go at throttle up.
At 73 seconds, an intense flash fire rapidly erupts, causing the total and final breakup of the vehicle. At Mission Control, shock, as seen in this film obtained first by 2020.
I remember seeing the smoke and some kind of separation. There was still a lot of noise and people were screaming and poppers were still going off. And that's when a teacher yelled down from the balcony for everyone to be quiet. Something had happened. And it was like dead silence.
Truly a moment of crisis. And I think most of us reacted that way, just stunned, unbelieving silence. Well, when we come back, entertainers, some of the best, got their stuff, reveal themselves, a decade of superstars. Bob Brown will have that for us.
Right. And before we go to a commercial, here's a rare sight. Barbara with just about more than she can handle. Another page from our 2020 album.
The Kaiser quintuplets were born on June 21st in 1983. The chances of having quintuplets was calculated by a German scientist, Sir Dr. Helen, in 1895. And he said the chances were 41 million to 1. It's 3.5 million to 1 to win a lottery, so it's much easier to win a lottery than it is to have quintuplets with the whole 2 babies at the same time.